Good afternoon. My name is Trish Heath. I'm the Education Officer of the Intermountain Chapter of the Association for Professionals in Infection Control and Epidemiology, abbreviated as I-APIC. I'd like to take a moment just to welcome you to our I-APIC inaugural webinar for the 2012 year. This monthly webinar series, in partnership with the Qualis Health, is a brand new venture for our chapter, and we hope that you find it both inspiring and useful in your practice. We have searched and planned the series to bring you information that addresses issues you face each and every day in your world, infection prevention. And if you have a subject that you'd like to see addressed with this educational webinar series, please take some time to pass those ideas back to me. My email is on the series and event flyers that you have received and is also located at the end of the slide presentation. So my colleague, Jennifer Pelagi, APIC board member and Qualis Health consultant, will share some brief housekeeping comments and then introduce our dynamic guest speaker.
Hello, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Jennifer Pelagi, a quality improvement consultant with Qualis Health, the quality improvement organization for Idaho and Washington. Please allow me to just take a couple of minutes to go over some housekeeping items before introducing our speaker. I want to thank you all for joining us today. We have over 120 registrants and many additional listeners sharing those lines. Because of that reason, we will keep all lines muted during the presentation, but invite you to submit questions or comments in the chat section of your WebEx screen. We will also have a question and answer period at the end of the talk. I want to extend a very special thank you to Acumentor Health, Oregon's QIO, and also to neighboring APIC chapters in helping us extend this invitation across Idaho, Oregon, and Washington, and for encouraging participation in this special API learning network. RN continuing education credits are available for one contact hour as approved by the California Board of Registered Nursing. Those interested in receiving credit must please complete the sign-in sheet that was sent as part of your handouts and be sure to include your email address and nursing license number. Completed sign-in sheets can be emailed or faxed to me. I'll give you my fax number later. And my email is included in the contact information slide. A CEU certificate will then be emailed to you. A recording will be made of this presentation and posted to the Intermountain APIC website. Handouts were sent to registrants ahead of time, so please let me know if you are still in need of a copy. Also, you will be offered a brief online survey at the close of the presentation. Please complete it so we can continue to improve our offerings and the format. The I-APIC HAI Prevention Learning Network has a powerhouse lineup for HAI topics and speakers this year. February and March bring CAUTI and SSI NHSN case studies by the CDC, and April and May include best practice authors on C. diff elimination and antimicrobial stewardship. But before we go further down the road of interventions and education to reduce rates, we ask you to pause with us for this hour today and embrace the voice and the perspective of the patient. Carrie O'Connell is kicking off our series not by accident, but purposely to ground us in all of us recognizing that an HAI rate is a person harmed by our care, a patient who never imagined the nightmare of becoming, in Carrie's own words, a numerator. Carrie, like many survivors, wants to aid the patient safety movement in reducing infections, increasing compassion, and including the patient voice in all of our work. Carrie, I am so honored to introduce you today, and you have our utmost attention.
Thank you, Jennifer. As she said, I am a construction project manager, senior project manager. I work for Mortensen Construction here in Denver. Right now, I'm sitting in a construction trailer in the middle of the old north-south runways at the old Stapleton Airport that we're in the process of redeveloping into neighborhoods and shopping centers and whatnot. Prior to 2004, I had never been in a hospital other than to have, my wife had 5 kids, and I had never been admitted and never had a problem at all. I had built a few hospitals, had utmost respect for healthcare, thought you guys pretty much gods. And then in 2004, I was painting my house one afternoon on a Saturday afternoon and had a bad fall off a ladder that went down 17 feet on the concrete and dislocated my elbow. And that launched me on a 2-year ordeal through the healthcare system, I guess, where I had 8 different surgeries on my arm, had a serious surgical error where they wrapped my radial nerve around a drill bit and destroyed about 4 inches of it. Had a serious infection, had several billing errors, and it was probably one of the most profound experiences of my life. We start out a little bit. I like to start this program. I've given it to a lot of different groups across the country and talk a little bit about bacteria, because as a construction guy, I deal a lot with mold, knew a little bit about microorganisms, but I never really appreciated the good they do either. That, what would the world be like without bacteria? Everything that ever died would still be on the side of the road. We wouldn't have much for beer. We wouldn't have much for wine. Wouldn't be able to digest our food. It'd be a tough, tough place if we didn't have bacteria. But when bacteria gets into the wrong places at the wrong time, it's a whole different animal. Oh, I'm sorry. One of the things in healthcare, I believe that I was fortunate. I experienced some of the very, very best things in healthcare. I also experienced some of the first. One of the funnier days when my wife hauled me down to the clinic in a little town outside in the mountains outside Denver, the day before Halloween, and I got a dislocated elbow that's hurting like that, and they said they could reduce it, and they asked me if I knew where I was, because I'd hit my head and had some bleeding going on too. And I said, yeah, I know where I am, but why are you guys all wearing clown suits? And they really were for Halloween. I also learned when I got in a little further into it that HIs are really a controversial thing. There's lots and lots of information and compendiums and recommendations. It's just a wealth of information on how to prevent them and how to treat them, but I found absolutely nothing in my research about what it feels like to be infected and how to talk to and help patients through the emotional side of infections. There's absolutely nothing there, and really 7 years later, there's very little there now even. And I still believe that when you put life under the microscope, you can really sort everything out into either love or fear. And infections are one of the most fearful things in all of life for both patients and for the caregivers. This poor kid in the picture, I don't know what kind of infection he has, but it kind of illustrates that infections go to a lot of different parts of the body, but they always affect the mind. The fear is just the hardest thing for one of us to deal with. I think it's the third most terrifying thing in healthcare, probably. Cancer is probably up there in the first, and HIV may be second, but I think HIs, with all the recent publicity, are scariest, either one of those two. And I think that if we can help patients cope with the pain and the fear, that their life becomes tremendously easier to get through this period in their life. You got to show your care. It's every bit as important as curing the disease. This is a shot. I was a week in a hospital. This was after surgery number 3, where they cleaned a bunch of scar tissue out of my elbow, tried to restore some motion. And I was in there for a week, and the old CPM machine was bending my arm back and forth 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I had a little drain tube in there that was sucking the fluids out. And when I got out of the hospital and finally got home, I had the same machine set up at home, and one night it blew up on me, and my arm just blew up, started bleeding all over the couch and the carpet and everything. And that's when I called the doctor, and it was my first hint, and he said, yeah, you might have an infection. About being an engineer, I started draining the fluid out of my arm into measuring cups and building a spreadsheet, and I'd email them the drains. About 4 days later, I was at work in the morning, and my arm swelled up the size of a watermelon and was hurting worse than the day I dislocated it. I called my doctor, and he said, "You better get to Vail right now," because he was in Vail, and I was in Denver. It's a 100-mile drive through the mountains. So I was petrified. My secretary offered to drive me, and I said, "No way, I'm not going to expose you to whatever this is." So I just hopped in my manual transmission truck with a bandaged up left arm and started driving to Vail. About halfway up Leveland Pass, I was hurting so bad and I was crying so hard I couldn't see the road anymore. It was totally blurred out, and I thought, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. I'm going to kill myself for sure. Then I had a little revelation. I rolled down my window. It's August, and it's fairly cold out, and I hung my bandaged arm out the driver's side window, and the cold air as it went over the mountain passes reduced the swelling enough that the pain went down and I could actually see the road. When I got to Vail, they were waiting for me, and PA was there with a gigantic hypodermic needle that she immediately stuffed in my arm and sucked the fluid out, and the swelling went down, and it was instant relief. The next day, they opened me up and said that it smelled like death in there, that it was really quite badly infected all the way down to the bone. And then they put me back into the isolation room, so they weren't sure what kind of organism I had. And I think patients, when your first 24 hours, you're just wondering if you're going to live or die. It's pure survival. You don't know what a staph infection is. You don't know anything about this stuff. And you're just wondering, is it really going to kill me? And you're wondering if maybe best case I'll lose my arm. And nobody's telling you a whole lot. They're all scared to tell you too much because they don't want to mislead you, I guess. About the second day, I started thinking, man, I must have spread this fluid all over my bathroom and a measuring cup. And I thought, man, is my whole family going to get this? And I put them all in the hospital and just call home and said, you can stay out of the bathroom, get all the Lysol you can, and don't do anything. So I guess somebody tell you how to clean that up. So the last part of the week, you're doing every other debridement surgery, so starve you for a day, can't eat, and then you're looking forward to surgery the next morning so that you can eat. And you're pretty certain that they're going to have to amputate. But then you get through that part, and they put you on Benko, and you start getting your life back together, and then you start wondering when you research it, is it going to come back? Is it done? Communications with patients are really, really difficult, even in the best of times. And I think with infections, they're even harder than most. I've done a whole series here of what I commonly heard from my caregivers and what I thought in my head when I heard it. And they're not on the same page at all. At first, the doctor just says, yeah, you had a staph infection. Didn't say what kind, just said staph. Then they started saying, well, we can't really tell you what kind. So I got up out of the bed one day and went out and pulled my charts out of the slot in the hallway and started reading them. And there's some blood tests in there that I went through. Didn't have much of a clue what they were saying, but in the margin it said somebody had written MRSE. I had no idea what that was, but I Googled it and got thousands and thousands of hits for MRSA and only a couple for MRSE. So then my doctor comes in and I start asking, what is this MRSE stuff? And you kept wondering, why couldn't you just tell me that up front? And you're thinking, what are they hiding? What are they covering up? And then the doctor tells you, yeah, this staph epidermis comes off your own skin. Not much we can do about it. And he said, no, it must be a real swab. But you're thinking, God, I showered that morning and It really can't be that bad. Why is this stuff in my elbow and not on my skin anymore? And you wondered when you saw him do all that prep work, doesn't that stuff work? A lot of times they would tell me, we just have no idea how that bacteria got into your arm. We have no idea how you got the infection. And you see, I mean, these are the smartest people on earth. How can they not know? Do they not care? Do they not want to know? Or am I just not worth the time it would take to do the research to figure it out? And I think you often get told that you're just an isolated case. You're the only one that got infected that day, that week, that month. And maybe you are, and maybe you're not. But it makes you feel like that you don't matter at all, that you were just a random event. You don't matter. Well, the other one was when we got involved with the state health department and they did some investigation, and everybody says, well, we cultured all the instruments, the surgical instruments were clean, and you're thinking, gee, I'd hope so. And I said, you went into a restaurant and you got food poisoning, and they said it was okay because the forks and knives were clean. Would that make you feel any better? Wouldn't make you feel good at all. I don't think the general public has any idea that there could ever be a sterilization issue. They just think that that's a given. Of course those instruments are clean. The hospital, these are the smartest people on earth. Then as you research, and I started talking to some infectious disease docs, and they start telling, well, all surgeries have bacteria, and there's not a lot we can do with it. It goes down layers and layers in your skin, and we can get the top layer, but we can't get the deep layers. And I said, I guess one of those deals, most of the time the patient's immune system's handle it just fine. And I said, but why did I get it? Why was it me? And I've been sick in years. I've been in the hospital ever, and I don't even get colds. I haven't missed a day of work in 10 years, but my immune system's so bad that I get this infection. And one of the neat words I learned when it was start talking about bioburden, and that's one of the best words I've ever learned. It kind of describes all of life in one easy word. So then they start raising a ruckus and saying, I want an investigation, I want to know why. And you think about it, when you run across friends or relatives and people and they tell you about really tragic things that happen, the first thing out of your mouth is the person okay? And the second thought out of your mouth and out of your mind is, how did it happen? How did this terrible event happen to this person? It's the most basic survival instinct we have as people. You got to know how bad things happen so that you can try to avoid them. But in infections, it's like when you start asking how and why, it's just nobody knows. And there's just no answers. And you said, I could really endure this better if I just knew how and why it happened. And then you start arguing with administrators. You get up into the vice president levels and this manager levels, and they start telling you about how great their infection rates are and how great their program is and how they're equal or better than the national averages. And it really doesn't help you much. I mean, you say, yeah, but I got the infection. And, it's really odd that people are such optimists. If you told a person you had a 1% chance of winning the lottery, that there's 100 tickets out there and you had one, you wouldn't sleep all night long thinking you were going to win. So if you tell a person you have a 1% chance of getting an infection in your surgery, you're like, oh, great, 99% sure there's no way I'll have a problem. They just don't understand the rates that well. I think it's a lot more accurate if you can tell people how many infections has your facility had that month and how many people a month go through it. Because, yeah, if you're running a 1% rate and there's 400 surgeries a month going through there and you tell the patient, yeah, we've infected on the average about one person every week, and it's a whole lot different feeling than saying it's just a 1% rate. They really pay attention when they're saying it's one a week. It could be them. This is a shot of full table in my basement and all the stuff I accumulated to fix a paralyzed arm and treat my infection. It's tough when you start arguing with the people out of money. I racked up $80,000 in bills to kill off an arm infection, which is quite well above the average. People say it's more like $25,000 to $50,000. And I spent $5,000 out of pocket that the insurance didn't cover just to kill off the infection. And as patients, we deal with the full physical hardship of infections. We deal with the full emotional aspects, and it just doesn't seem right that we should get saddled with the full financial burden as well. And I think that one of my utmost recommendations is to try to lessen that burden for the money. And then they'll start telling you that when you sign consent forms that you bought whatever cost it took for the deal with those infections. And I said, well, I still wish when I signed that consent form somebody would put bankruptcy on there as one of the possible complications, because it does happen to people a lot. I know patients have backed up hundreds of thousands of dollars in bills treating infections. When the fight gets really hard, and I had a risk manager tell me one day, just go ahead and sue us. I said, you can't prove how that bacteria got into your arm. It was right before I was going to see my doctor for an appointment. It was probably the hardest, most devastating thing that happened to me in all the 2 years. Just having somebody that cared so little about you was just flat out say, go ahead and sue him. And you kind of think that maybe I've been better off if it just was stuff, but it just killed me because you see the bills pouring in and you're just petrified of how you're going to deal with them. You know, we have a pretty good list of never events now, but I do think there's never events that are more emotional than they are physical. And this is one of them. You should not tell people. Frankly, this was another shot from the basement. I got pretty good. I was sitting down there for an hour in the morning, an hour at night, and under a IV pole, and I put my laptop down there, and I could read emails and answer emails with one hand, and do my CPM machine while I was doing the Vanco, so I got triple duty out of it. It does have blessings. It cleared up some bad breath. I don't think I had any acne for about 8 weeks. Lost some weight. Because eating all of a sudden wasn't very much fun. Everything tasted like Vanco. It really, since 2005 there, I don't think I hardly ever miss washing my hands anymore. And then I'm terrible at that. But you get pretty good after this. The major vocabulary builder, learned all kinds of new words that I never ever knew before. I also talked to people who supply my Vanco into the little intermate bottles so that I could actually infuse myself. I was driving to work in the morning, and I'd go to board meetings and put my little intermate bottle out on the table, and everybody get really nervous and pass all everything I'd ask them to pass that day, and said, let's get this meeting over fast, get this guy out of here. But storms do produce growth, though. I mean, a whole different person after you do this. This Next slide is a survey that my Friends of Consumers Union put out to patients and got the responses. And I agree with a great many of them. I do a lot of work with the CU people. The top one, number 10, I just not top one, but no one paid attention to me. That isolation ward is the loneliest place on earth. And I told my family not to come in, and it is a tough place. Request for prevention. I found out later in my later surgeries that everybody just tells you can do it the same way we always do it. They didn't really want to talk about doing things any differently than their standard way. I wasn't informed if that's a common one. I don't tell you till it's absolutely obvious. Taking responsibility for loved ones that are infected is really tough. People go in having all kinds of surgeries thinking they'll be out in a day and they'll be totally healed in 6 weeks, and they find out after they get infection that they're laying in bed for 6 months. Their families are impacted. A lot of people tell patients all the time that it's just one of those things. It's like the rain. It comes and goes, and there's nothing they can do about it. The suffering is intense, to say the least. I know several people that lost jobs when their PTO and vacation benefits ran out and infections were still raging and they got replaced. No one would accept responsibility. That's almost a given, it seems like, in infections. The hospital blames the doctor blames the hospital. It gets really hard for a patient to understand. No one told me about spreading infections to my loved ones, and no one told me I just had that fear. And then you come up with this burning desire not to have it happen to anyone else. My prescription empathy, I call it, on how to relate better to patients, is to always tell the patient what kind of organism he has, give them handouts, give them links and websites, tell them how he contracted it. Even if you don't know exactly, you've probably got 3 or 4 good ideas. And give them best case, worst case. You get in there and you start researching, saying, I have 10% chance of dying from an infection. There's probably some things they should have been doing while they're sitting in the hospital, updating rules and whatnot. I gave this speech to the New Mexico Hospital Association group, and the nurses, mostly IT nurses, were just kind of stunned. They said, walk up and down the halls of hospitals all day long and check charts and see if they're making progress or getting worse, but it never really occurred to us that we ought to go in and talk to these people. I think IPs I love nurses. They help me get through this. They're the most compassionate and give you the best information out there than doctors usually do. Go in and talk to them. Tell them what's going on. Tell them what they can expect and let you know. Give us some clues on how to prevent infections. There's not a lot of really good ironclad stuff out there to tell people. Waive the out-of-pocket bills. It's a big one. And I don't think it really hit the financial side of the hospitals too much. At least if you can't cover the entire cost, cover the out-of-pocket cost. And then learn to express remorse. A lot of people when you have infection just, one of those things, you can't prevent them. Yeah. And then the survey letters, it's mostly post-surgery. I was about 2 days after I got home from the bereavement surgeries in the hospital. I get a letter in the mail from the hospital, and you think, if you're sending me a letter, you see how sorry they are, and you open it up, and it's a 2-page form letter saying, Do you have any swelling? Do you have any redness? Do you have any indication you might have an infection? You know, just there for a whole week. It's not possibly no. But the ultimate of all prescription is to love the infected patients. Care for us, even the obnoxious ones like me. Things I tell patients and how to prevent them. I'm a big advocate of colonization therapy, even though lots of studies that are inconclusive. But it's cheap, and it really makes you feel like you're doing something. You're taking showers, you're swabbing your nose, you're taking antibiotics, and I think it gives you a lot of peace of mind saying you're actually doing something. I always tell patients to beg your docs to wear double gloves and knee suits, and sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. I tell patients to call a surgical team huddle before when you're in pre-op and say, let's pray. And for my last surgery, I wrote right on the informed consent form, please, please, please don't infect me. And surprisingly, they still operated on me. It was amazing. But, I told patients to pin pictures of your family members on your gown, just to prove to them you're a real person and there's other people in your life that care, and have a prophylactic attitude. You know, and on probably the last day of my surgery, they were getting ready to put a Goshan catheter in me, and they didn't have one in the hospital. They had to order it up from Denver, so I wrote it down and family spelled it for me and Googled it that night, went on Goshan's website and studied everything they had on how to insert a catheter. So the next morning, the general surgeon comes in and says, Mr. O'Connell, you know what a Goshan catheter is? He says, yes, I do, sir. And here's my list of the 10 common complications of putting these in. I want you to go through them with me one by one and tell me how you're going to prevent each and every one of these. And you've only heard about 8 of them, but maybe it wasn't a tactful thing to do, but it did get his attention. You know, when you get down to the people like me that once you have infections, you have to go back in and have another surgery. You got a whole different patient on your hands than the guys that have never been infected before. Because when I was in for my last surgery, number 8, I was scared. I was shaking. I was trembling. I was so scared I could not talk. And up to that day, I'd sworn that God only was fiction in movies. There's no way you can be too scared not to talk. But I was absolutely petrified. You can't tell people who have had infection that you're just going to use your standard technique. You got to come up with special things. You got to use every trick in the bag to make them feel better, to help calm them down. And you got to let people that are up and down the floor in the nurse station know that this guy's a previous survivor and he's in for another section. He's liable to be a real pain in the neck. He's going to be scared out of his mind. He's going to be making you wash your hands every time you get anywhere from 10 feet from him. But let them know so that they can try to be sympathetic to it. So, I think the greatest opportunity that each and every one of you could have is what I call emotional coercion. I was after surgery number 8, I was in physical therapy one day, and my therapist says, you know, Kerry, you need to try to you've done tendon transfers, you need to retrain your muscles to go up instead of down, and I need to get you on E-stem again. And she said, I got a patient, she met him once in here named Eric that has a machine. So she called Eric up, and Eric wasn't working that day, and he hassled down to the clinic with his E-stem machine. And we got to talking, and Eric had priced a motorcycle, and tragically, tried to rip his arm off his body. It was his right arm versus my left arm, so we tried to shake hands. bad arm to bad arm. That didn't work. And we tried to shake good to good, and that didn't work. And we just laughed. But we got to talking with the therapist and Eric and I for probably an hour and a half that afternoon. We'd been through almost identical things. The room just glowed. It was just amazing that there was another human being on this earth that had been through the same thing that I had. And he felt the same way. And it seemed like you were in there for 5 hours, and it was probably an hour and a half talk. It was just one of the most incredible experiences of my life. That there's another person that's just like you. And I think that hospitals could do this so easily. They can, you don't need funding or money. Just ask infection patients if you'd be willing to be part of a group, or you'd be willing to talk to other people that are going to be infected next month, next year, and get them together so that they understand that they're not the only ones. Hospitals have always had the physical pain scale, and I've come up with my own emotional pain scale, going all the way from minor slights and rudeness to all the way up to death. And I've met a lot of parents who have lost kids to infections, and spouses, and mothers and fathers, and I guarantee you, the really hard thing about infections is, depending on how severe they are, they can hit you at any point in that pain scale. Some infections are really minor and don't affect the patient much at all. Some are absolutely devastating and taking lifetimes to get over. Forgiveness is important in infections. I was sitting in the hospital, and I've been in the system now for about 9 months, and I started out with a broken arm. Now I had a paralyzed arm and had a numb foot. They tried to take the screw nerve out of my leg, and that didn't work. And now I had an infection, and they pulled the implant out of my arm, and it seemed like everything was going worse and worse and worse. And I was seriously considering asking the doctor to amputate my arm. He walked in one day and he says, "Kerry, I really have to apologize for you. I gave you this infection. I don't know how it happened or why it happened, but I gave it to you, and you're the last guy on earth with all that you've been through that should have to endure this." And that was the most courageous act I've seen in years and years. And it gives you strength to keep on going and keep on having more surgery. I think just simple saying you're sorry works really well for the low end of the pain scale in the 1, 2, 3 range, and deep heartfelt apologies like I received look pretty good at the mid-range of the scale. But when you get on the high end of the scale, when you've lost loved ones, there's probably not a perfect apology. It's more of a commitment to a process that you're going to ask for forgiveness from that patient for a long period of time to help them get through it. So my ultimate infection cure, infections don't have to be nightmares. You got to really work on the fear, work on neutralizing the anger so that they can heal both emotionally and physically. And I was sitting in that isolation room, and I was 48 at the time, and BlackBerry was dead, and laptop was dead, and nobody was coming in to talk to you. You got a whole week to think about your life. And it does a lot of good. Put a middle-aged workaholic into a nice little ward for a week and make him think about life. Maybe besides work, it isn't all there is to life. This little slide is, I don't know if it's working out there, but I used to get into arguments when I became a healthcare infection reporting law pastor in Colorado. So now I sit on a committee with a bunch of infection control nurses, and we used to get in a lot of arguments, and they say, "It's not my fault." I say, "It's not my fault. I was unconscious." But maybe there's this little angel that floats around dropping bacteria into our wounds, like an evil angel. But I got a new theory. Last week, we came out with our annual report, and I noticed that all the hospitals in Colorado have Saint in their name. It's with St. Anthony's and St. Joe's and Presbyterian St. Luke's and St. Mary's all had the best rates in Colorado. I looked up on Idaho's website, and you guys got 26 hospitals up in Idaho with St. Mary's, so you guys should have some pretty good rates. Bonhoeffer is one of my favorite guys, and I think he says it pretty well. Pain, even infection pain, can really make you grow, can really make you into a different person. Another good quote from a fellow named Robert Bly. The personal growth occurs when you have the right wound, the right point in your life, and the presence of the right person. And I think every infection control practitioner can be that right person that helps that patient understand what they're going through and helps them grow. I had several therapists that really helped me grow, and one for them, I could have easily retreated into bitterness and for a long, long time. So the bottom line is, each and every one of you infection control people out there has the ability to change this from a life-threatening experience into a life-changing experience through the expression of empathy and through talking to people and really understanding what they're going through. And I appreciate each and every one of you, because without you, we would be in bad shape. You guys are the front line. You're in the war every single day. And you're the ones that keep these rates from being 10 times what they are. What role does you guys play sometimes? You give your lives on? This is my friend Jennifer gets to do this slide. I'm sorry. Jennifer,
hi there.
Where?
I am
okay.
Here. I just took myself off mute, and
okay.
Terry, I'm nearly at a loss for words, but just what kind of a role, playing off of what you've been talking about, can the infection preventionists do to ensure that care is patient-centered and that API communication is transparent? And that's where, in addition to all the duties and all the things they got to get done, is just simply to be a liaison and an advocate for both staff and patients, because sometimes they really just don't understand API very well, the people on the front line or the patients in the bed. And we also need to help our leadership and staff translate numerator language into real patients with real harm stories, and help use those stories to trigger improvement work. And also, the infection preventionist can be one of the people who can help find a way to bring the patient or family voice into ongoing infection prevention work, whether it's a committee work or a QI project. Not just engaging the patient at the bedside in education, but actually bringing patients and families into QI work in the hospital or in the nursing home or wherever the setting may be.
It's infectious. Empathy, a few years ago my office was downtown Denver outside Coors Field, and I noticed looking outside the window on baseball game days that there was a blind guy standing on the street outside my office and asking for money. And I noticed there was these huge crowds of people would go by him, that if one person gave him money, then all of a sudden 3, 4, 5 would be lined up there giving him money, and then there'd be long periods where no one helped, and then one person would have the courage to give him money again, and sure enough, 3 or 4. And I watched this over a period of weeks, and it was really amazing that one person having the courage to show empathy touches other people's hearts and gets them to jump in and do it. And it works that way in hospitals, too. If you can get a few people, it'll catch on like fire, and pretty soon everybody on the floor is doing it. And touching people's hearts is really why you guys got into this business. Any questions?
And while we're waiting for folks to make comments or ask questions, this is Jennifer. I just really am amazed with you, Carrie O'Connell. The vantage point that you have given us into your experience as a patient and with your HAI is invaluable and unique, and I'm quite moved, and I'm sure others are as well. You've helped us feel the fear that a patient in your shoes would feel, and yet at the same time you have shared wonderful advice with us, and you've touched our lives and our practices, and I'm grateful for that. True patient-centered care requires the empathy that you describe, and we thank you for reminding us so eloquently and with such an engaging and forgiving spirit how we can incorporate that empathy into our practice.
It actually isn't a question, it's kind of a comment. We spoke a lot about empathy and backing up each other to help individuals that are going through infections, but we also need to think about backing up each other and protecting our patients, because we had a young woman, she happened to be my friend, and she was brand new surge tech, and the doctor broke his sterile field and nobody in the room would speak up, so she did, and the doctor fought with her. And luckily the nurses were willing to back up the surge tech, and they protected that resident or patient. But I think it's really important that we back each other up, because sometimes the doctors can be intimidating. So we need to really protect our patients.
Thank you so much for that comment.
I agree.
So true that we have to have a culture where we can support each other clinically, and taking care of patients, and making it safe to make sure that they're the first thing on our mind, and protecting them from HAIs and other untoward events. And I'll go ahead and take over moving the slides along, and we'll still be open to questions, so do feel free to make comments or questions.
Hi, and again, thank you so much for presenting your story to us. It really is just really eye-opening to all of the things that can happen in healthcare. My question to you is, in hindsight now, how would you change the consenting process, and would it have made a difference in your decision to have surgery?
Well, I do a lot of work with that. And I found it was really interesting. I found that I had I blew up my right arm overusing it afterwards. And so I thought smarter when I started going in. It was just a bicep fracture, so it was an easy one. And I found that you really have to drag the possible complications out of doctors. They wouldn't even talk about it. I'd bring in charts and tell them, what about this? What about this? And you have to drag it out. And I found it was harder for doctors to talk about what might go wrong than it was for the doctor to admit when I really got an infection. And I still have to comprehend why it is so hard for them to tell you about all these potential hazards. I mean, when you're a patient, you think about an infection as what's the worst thing that ever happened to you as a kid? You had an earache, you had a sinus infection, you had an infected toe maybe, or a sliver. Nobody thinks about infections that can get into your bloodstream or cause you to amputate something or lose your arms and legs. So nobody has any idea. So I tell people they're going in to get artificial knees that, no, don't plan on 6 weeks. Plan on 6 months. Make sure you got people to watch your kids, and make sure your boss isn't going to lay you off, and make sure you got a really good long-term and short-term disability insurance so that if you do get an infection, it doesn't wipe out your life. And nobody wants to tell patients that, oh, that's going away, they wouldn't have surgery. But they need to know, because it's really hard to deal with the rest of your life when you're laying in bed with a drip line.
Thank you, Carrie.
What do I tell them?
Thank you, Helen, for the question. And if you have more questions or comments, please feel free to submit those or use your chat box. I'm just going to move really quickly through these last few slides, being aware of our time together is drawing to a close. We have about 5 minutes left. These are just some resource slides for you. I wanted to make sure that you had some things that you could turn to after we get off this call that could be a resource for providers or patients, depending on the resource. So the Institute for Patient and Family-Centered Care had many tools available. I put snapshots of a couple of them there. One is a document that gives tips to patients and families who want to be involved or want to share their story, like Carrie. More and more are wanting to all the time. And there's also a partnering with patients and families to enhance safety and quality toolkit, which can be helpful to providers. The National I-APIC, Association for Professionals in Infection Control and Epidemiology, have an infection prevention and youth campaign that you can find online. And Consumers Union Safe Patient Project, which is a great place for patients who might want to take that first step of sharing their story. I know I talked with the folks at this great project, and they were able to put me in touch with Carrie, and I'm grateful for that. Also, TMIT has many programs and webinars available that are wonderful at safetyleaders.org. And they also have a new resource called Speaker Link. So if you're wanting to find a speaker, whether it's a healthcare speaker or a patient speaker, or if you want to become one, that's a great place to go to either become one or to find someone. And then finally, another page on the Joint Commission has resources available. One example is Patients as Partners in the Infection Prevention and Control Process. That's a book or a PDF book. There is a small cost to that, but there it is available. And, of course, the Institute for Healthcare Improvement has some great resources, one being this white paper, but there's others as well. Our contact information is here. Carrie has, thankfully, he has supplied his email, his phone number, and a wonderful blog that he keeps there under his name. We have the Intermountain I-APIC chapter website and Trish Heath, her email address. And then your quality improvement organizations are always a great resource for quality improvement help and assistance. And also, if you're looking to try to find ways to engage patients and families, may be a great place to turn. So we have Qualis Health and Acumentra both listed here. And finally, some save the dates in this I-APIC HAI prevention webinar series. Next month will be Wednesday, February 15th. We will have the CDC on the line talking about CAUTI and going over case studies and the use of NHSN. And again, very similarly, in March, we have surgical site infections, case studies with the CDC. So please join us. We will send out that information in a timely manner so that you're reminded when the time comes. I just want to say thank you one more time to Carrie O'Connell. I'm grateful that you joined us. I'm so grateful that you joined us today. And Trish, if you have any final comments, please feel free to give them.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that people, especially in our chapter area, if you have any concerns or questions, and you don't have to be a member to reach out and use us as a resource. We always definitely do welcome new members. But give us a call. We're here to help, and we welcome you to our meetings and of course, the educational series.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We're going to go ahead and sign off. We appreciate you joining us today, and we will be sending you a link to the archived recording that you may wish to view again or share with others. Also, make sure you send in those RNCEU sign-ins, and we'll be sure to get the certificates to you. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.